For the audience award. We greatly appreciate it. Also, a great opportunity to pick up a ticket, the closing night reception, and audio walk tomorrow. And I believe there are a couple of the audiences, or sorry, a couple of the filmmakers in the audience. If you'd like to come up. Hello, thank you all so much for joining us. So we have here in person, we have Nikki, who directed Telephone for God, and Charles, who made The Glass Evangelist. Thank you so much for joining us. And then virtually, we have Abigail, who created Kid with the Pearl Earring, Laura, who created Landforms, and Anushka. Thank you for joining us as well. So this program, obviously with the title False Self-Sentiment, very much deals with object memory and the way that we are shaped by our environments and our environments shaped us or shape us. And I feel that The Glass Evangelist, as a closing piece in this program, summarizes that very well. In a personal way, how an object or medium can influence us, but also generationally and communally and culturally, often in ways that we can't perceive in the moment or plan for. And then we can see through the program too how each film captures our relationship with materials in different ways. And I just would like to go around to each filmmaker and just pick your brain a little bit about what drew you to these subjects in particular, these mediums, these objects. And just speak a little bit about what caught your interest. And I would love to start virtually. Anushka, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so the inception of this film for me was a really deep desire and a personal quest to understand the journeys of my grandmothers and their experience of the partition of India. So, just a little context, India was partitioned in 1947 by the British rule, and both sets of my grandparents had to flee their ancestral homeland, which was in Pakistan at the time, and then move to India. And, I don't know how all of your families are, but in mine, we never discussed it. It was a completely hidden history that we didn't talk about. And so my grandmothers are both still alive. In fact, one of them just turned 90 this year. And so I really wanted to dive into these stories and kind of understand their experiences and perspectives of assimilation, migration, movement. What are the cultural costs of that? What are the joys and the gains of that? And, myself being an immigrant to the United States from India at 18, I wanted to kind of understand this journey of mine through theirs as well. Of course, very different. Forced displacement versus choice and a certain level of privilege being able to come to the States. But there were so many emotional overlaps as a group of women in the family. And that's kind of what drew me to this story.
Thank you so much. Oh, I think we may have lost connection. Can you all still hear me virtually? Okay, wonderful, yes. Wonderful. Great. I would love to pass it to you next, Laura, if you'd speak a little bit about what drew you to the subject.
Well, thanks for having me. And so Landforms is a project that I worked on for a number of years, and it kind of was instigated on my moving from California to Western New York, where many of my, well, pretty much all my films deal with landscape in some way. And so, in getting to know the landscape of Western New York, and as well continuing with certain themes that were coming out in previous films, exploring geological forms, exploring things that were buried. I came across the fossil park first as a location that what often happens is I encounter a place that I have a curiosity about, and a place such as the fossil park, which like there's so many kind of former sites of industrial use that have been turned recreational. That's something that like in my earlier film Devil's Gate, like a dam that had this history was also a place where people went jogging, and um, so the place, the fossil park, that I actually filmed that shortly. I don't know, maybe 2021, even like during COVID. And so some people were wearing masks, and I was very kind of drawn to this landscape that looks a bit post-apocalyptic, and you don't really know what people are doing. They're digging and you don't know what they're digging for. So then that developed further into thinking about ideas of not just unearthing but also collecting. And then I encountered a local artist, Nicole Hockrick, who makes a lot of work through collecting microplastics in the landscape and then making art with it, but also gathering the community in part of like this project. And she goes to she's done it all over the world, but this one location, Unity Island, is a place that she went to a lot. And so I went with her and documented the collection of these microplastics. And then the kind of third integration of that was the abstraction of bringing together, animating the fossils and microplastics and kind of creating this plastic glomerate future fossil. So yeah, I think I'll leave it for now.
That's great. Thank you so much. And Abigail.
Yeah, the kid with the pearl earring really started around the story of me losing this earring and finding it the next day in Central Park, which is just like one of the most miraculous and bizarre things that's ever happened to me. And I knew that was the center of the story and the center of the connection of between these two relationships with these two really different men, these two very different relationships. And so that was sort of the center of it, and like this really small object and its relationship to space, being in New York, and this impossible miracle of finding it the next day in Central Park in summer after riding the subway, the A 280 blocks. It's totally miraculous. And yeah, so that was the center of it, and time as well, because when I had lost it and found it, it had been years since the relationship, and it is a really interesting point for me of memory as a very active thing and forgiveness as a very active thing, and how are those both very, very present. And so in that and in relationship with my father of sort of exploring these griefs through objects, because that's what's still present with these men that I'm not in contact with anymore. So the objects were, I remember sending an early draft to my friend Ivana, who's a really brilliant writer, and she kind of got to the heart of it before I did, of like objects as a replacement in memory. And I thought that was very profound, and she said it much better than I did, but I can say it in the Q&A.
Yeah, I do agree. That's very profound. And then in person here, if I could pass it to you, Nikki, your
Sure.
thoughts?
Thank you. I just want to thank my Mises and thank you, all of you filmmakers. It's an honor to show with you. I really enjoyed each of your films in different ways, so thank you. Yeah, so for my particular project, you know, I during my first academic appointment, I learned a lot. It coincided maybe with a health crisis. So I was like trying to figure out my health, and I was involved in this program, like that took place over the summer. I'll tell you about it after the screening if you're interested, because I do think it's a wonderful program. But it coincided with the Dowsers annual convention, right? So if you don't know what dowsing is, it's like a form of divination. It's tapping into ancient ways of knowing and your intuition. So I think, yeah, what was so interesting is participants of this, you know, documentary program in the summer, they were so intrigued that they all got a little bit distracted from their creative practice, myself included. I ended up, you know, sort of taking a break from my duties, and I took, with the support of my program, I took a dowsing workshop. I got a certificate in dowsing. I also, I just encountered crystals. I met interesting people. And I think it was this place of like searching for healing and maybe experiencing like the limitations of allopathic medicine or being failed by allopathic medicine, maybe due to gender bias or other biases in healthcare. That just kind of opened me up to Drew and Carly and what they do. And then also just like, yeah, just meeting Drew and Carly and yeah, just seeing light passing through quartz crystal and learning a little bit about the science and Marcel Vogel and his legacy. That's what brought me to it. It's such a good thing.
Yeah, it's a beautiful film too. I'd love to learn more about dowsing after. I'll have to find you and ask. Yeah, and then Charles, what brought you to this subject?
Hello. So I was at Duke as a grad student doing my MFA, and my roommate, his good friend was Sejiro, who's studying ophthalmology at Duke in the film. So I just became good friends with him, and then I went and I visited Burnsville just out of for fun in Appalachia. And he was always he didn't really say anything about his family's history or lineage, but I kind of gleaned it, and I was very fascinated by it, and so I did a lot more research on Corning's history, and on the family's history, and also the idea that I didn't know anything about glass fascinated me. I also, I guess, watching it this time, I was thinking a lot too, because I haven't seen it in a little while. But I think when I was at Duke, it was my first time in that kind of academic setting, and I don't know if it was internal or if I was getting it from other people, but I felt like angsty about being an art student at such a STEM school, I guess. And I felt kind of like unseen or something. And I was interested in exploring that. I don't think they are very different fields, I guess, art and science on a basic level. And yeah, and mostly also interested in like the occultism and the mysticism that's in between those two things, especially in a historical sense. Like those two things were inseparable through kind of mysticism, I think. So trying to tap back into that curiosity, and that's about it. Yeah, and I was doing another thesis project idea, and then I was kind of immediately like, this is what I should do, and that's basically it. Yeah, and I just went in for about a year on it.
Terrific. It's such an expansive documentary too. You cover so much. I learned so much about glass. I feel like I took a class on it, so thank you for teaching me along the way. Yeah, and then I as I was watching through this program again, I was thinking very much about, in fact, Nikki, your program with a lot of the language about objects as a place to store energy, to transmit energy, to hold memory and parts of yourself as well. There's very much an element of identity and bonding with these things, and using that to facilitate different emotional releases, or being able to take in new emotion. So I was thinking a lot about that during this program. And it made me think about how each of you have, I'm sure, through the course of making these films, gone through a similar process of putting yourself into and getting something out, of being so tied to these subjects and objects in your own way through making the film. And so I kind of wonder, I guess I don't really have like a specific question, but I just wonder if you have any reflections on that as filmmakers about how the process of creating a document, or in some senses an object to capture an object, if that resonates with any of you, or if you have any thoughts on that.
I can jump in. So, you know, the fossils that were being collected, I mean, those are 380 million years old, right? And this location that was once a quarry for cement, you think about the relationship of these objects to the people who are collecting them, and thinking about, you know, what is the impetus for, I mean, there's a certain excitement in, you know, digging for anything, right? Like finding lost treasure, but, you know, what is the significance of that? And stepping back and thinking about, in this time where, you know, we're dealing with climate emergency, right? That we are fascinated by collecting remnants of a previous extinction, right? So this is a theme that is within the film, and the fossils themselves are kind of symbols of that extinction. And so those physical objects, and then the plastics that, you know, are from all sources of clothing tags, like teeth cleaning things, things that are parts of toys, or things that are unrecognizable because they've broken apart so much. And that, you know, we all know now that we are, you know, breathing microplastics, that it's in our brains, it's in our blood. So, I mean, my approach is not so much to, you know, make a traditional documentary that gives you statistics, and, you know, you can certainly look into that information on your own, but more in a poetic and like creative way to think through those relationships between these two objects, that are both unearthed from the ground, and what they mean about our present, our past, and our future.
Thank you so much. To shift a little bit then, I also have a question for you, Anusha, or I'm sorry, Anushka, because your film doesn't necessarily, it's not necessarily bound to one specific object, but rather more of a photographic memory, or a lack of object, a lack of place. And so I wonder if in the course of making this film, your perspective on those objects, or on like the tangibility of memory changed at all, and if that's something you can speak to at all in the creation of your documentary.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was interesting because, you know, we were really looking at kind of building a family archive, but it was such a non-traditional archive in the sense, like you're saying, you know, it was so much based off memory and all of these kind of intangible, amorphous thoughts and feelings. Like an example would be, we would ask my grandmother to describe her childhood home, and she would just have really little snippets of memory, and then we'd kind of build the layout of her home from this memory to add to this archive. But it was kind of a dream archive. So it was kind of, loose and ephemeral in many ways. And then on the other perspective, with the objects that we did have in the film, because this film was collaborative with two other really brilliant directors who I wish could be here, we all kind of approached each object with our own personal history and narrative. And so one of the prominent, objects in the film were these mango cores. And Alicia Tejpal, who is one of the other directors on the film, and I grew up in India together and went to the same high school together. And oh, there she is.
Perfect timing.
Yeah. And so Alicia was just saying how we grew up in India together and how we both approach the objects from different perspectives. And, we both have our own kind of history with mangoes, for example, being so kind of built into our childhood memories. And the excavation of that and coming to the pit of that mango felt very kind of symbolic for both of us, given our own histories.
And I should say welcome too. Thank you so much for joining us. But yes, please go ahead and speak to that. I'd love to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, Alicia, we're talking about I don't know, she might have missed your question if you wanted to.
I did. I'm so sorry. I completely messed up time difference, and I had an alarm on my phone for 5:30 p.m. And then obviously there was time difference involved that I missed.
That's perfectly fine. We're so glad to have you. Your film was beautiful. To essentially paraphrase the question, I was asking about, we've been talking kind of about the way that objects hold memory and can be, transmitting of emotion and holding of emotion. And I was kind of prefacing this with how there isn't necessarily, aside from mangoes, one core object in the film, and it seems to be a little bit more about the intangibility and as Anushka was saying, the creation of an archive through the course of this film. But yes, I would love to hear what you have to say about what the mangoes mean to you in this film, or just your thoughts in general.
Firstly, thank you so much for playing the film. And yeah, I mean, I got the last end of your answer, Anushka. But I think if I were to add anything, it would just be that I think as a team, we were all kind of thinking through not just how objects hold memory, but also how objects have come to hold sort of like an imagined reality in our minds, but also a certain stereotyped relationship to representations of South Asia as well. And the fruit in specific has all of these stereotyped connotations, not just in South Asia, but also all through Latin America and Africa. And I think we talked a lot about how we could disrupt or sort of flip on its head our relationship to these connotations. And something else we discussed a lot was also, I think within the idea of an archive and an archive of objects, we often forget that even being able to hold objects for families that have been displaced and are being displaced is in itself a sign of a certain privilege for us to be able to move with objects. And I think keeping that in mind, sort of really focusing on what these objects would mean, both in terms of where families are coming from, what it means to carry them with you, and then what happens in situations when you aren't able to carry those photographs. What are the things we attach memory, we attach our relationships, our understanding of where we come from, where do we attach them? And I think the mango was just something that all of us, Anushka, me, having grown up in India, but also Shivangani, who was one of the writers on the film, we were all sort of thinking about the mango and its stereotype relationship to India. And I can talk about the mango for hours because it's something I've been researching. It has all these relationships also to like the NPT and like contracts signed between the governments. And so how the mango holds that place in our imagination, and what it would look like to sort of flip that visual reference to these sucked on, eaten mango pits.
Thank you so much for that. That was so wonderfully articulated. And I am sure that we could spend so much time just asking questions and chatting amongst ourselves, but I'd love to open it up to the audience if anybody has any questions for our wonderful filmmakers.
Nikki, I think your film cleansed my auric field, so thank you. I have a quick question. I wonder if the opening, just the opening, very opening clip, was that from In Search Of, the 70s show with Leonard Nimoy?
Yes, it was.
Is that available? That particular? I know there's a bunch on YouTube, and I love watching them, but I'd like to learn more about Vogel from the perspective of 1970s. Leonard
Yeah,
Nimoy.
that's available. You can borrow my DVD set.
Oh, I would love to. Thank you.
You're welcome.
This is a question for Laura. Laura, I loved seeing this big. I've seen it on my laptop before, so it was great to see it big. And for those of you streaming in, this theater has remarkable sound. And Miley's soundtrack was just really incredible. And I just wanted to hear a little bit maybe about the conversation you had with Miley in terms of making this really haunted, ambient sounds for a very physical place.
Hi, Kelly. Thanks for the question, and I'm really glad to hear that the sound was, a good experience. I haven't actually seen this in the theater yet, but I will be in New York next month, so I'm looking forward to that. But yeah, it was a joy to work with Miley. For years, I've been, considering various projects, and oftentimes, end up creating the sound myself. But for this project, I really wanted to get away from the natural sound. I wanted a space that was a bit alien. And I mean, Miley and I are very much, on the same wavelength. I think you are as well. You've collaborated with her as well, and a lot of other filmmakers that I admire. And we had a lot of back and forth, and sometimes minutia of, like the rhythm of the animation, or the mood, or the just lots of details, lots of going back and forth. But I wanted to take it, even though I'm documenting real places, so there's the documentary element of it, that I wanted the audience to be transported to an other space, and through the soundtrack of the fossil park, and then there's some more natural sounds brought in with the collecting of the plastics. But I think she also really worked with the ideas behind the quotes, and how like a darkness underneath the feeling of the film. I don't want to take up too much time, but thank you so much for the question.
Abigail, I was wondering if you could talk a bit about finding those images to elevate the words of your film without just directly reenacting what the story was saying. And also if you could speak a bit about working with the voice actress and making it feel like a sort of conversation rather than a voiceover.
Thanks for that question. So some of the images we knew going in pretty explicitly what they were going to be. So the bike getting slammed into the city bike dock was a very central image that I knew ahead of time. And then some of the images we knew we wanted to discover in space. So we sort of separated a lot of the images when I talk about my father are in Coney Island, which is this like very nostalgic, dreamy, bizarre part of New York, and then a lot of parts where I'm talking about the earring or my ex-boyfriend were nearby Central Park, because that's where I found the earring. So much of the movie, or in writing the movie, was about coincidence and like opening yourself up to coincidence. So opening ourselves up to not knowing what every image would be was a really difficult exercise in openness for me, but it was very wonderful to sort of let go of control that way. So I actually did the voiceover, and it felt really important to me that I do it because it is so personal. And there was a version of it in early drafts where I invited a lot of my friends to do, like friends who also have a dead father or who also have a complicated relationship with sexual violence. And it felt like it really muddied it. Something that's really important is how specific it is makes it more universal. So it being just my singular voice became really important, and I addressed it to my ex-boyfriend as sort of an easy in, of like, it's an easier way to talk. It's easier to talk to an ex-boyfriend than it is to, it makes it more specific for me. So that was an easier in for me.
I think that's all the time we have for today. Thank you all so much for joining us in person and virtually. And for the audience, thank you so much. We'll hope to see you for the next program.